All right, so we are now in our fourth and final unit, which is the usability test unit. This unit is going to have actually three kind of stair-stepped assignments that go with it. I'm going to start from the first one and then work my way down. You'll notice on the assignment sheet that they're described throughout them. Please, if you looked at the assignment sheet before Monday the 10th at 1 o'clock, go back and download the new assignment sheet. I noticed that I had downloaded an old one to it, and it didn't have the third part of the description of the assignment. So I want to be sure that everyone has a clear assignment sheet. So please, like I said, if you looked at that assignment sheet before 1 o'clock on Monday, July 10th, go back and download it again and take a look at it again. I'm going to walk through it right now, though. So the first part, which we'll call 4.1, is a website redesign proposal. This is going to be the very first step in the process, and I'm going to scaffold how I assign these, so you'll have these due at kind of different times. Be sure that you're paying attention to assignment due dates when these different parts of the assignment are due, and please email me at any time if you have any questions. So the description for this section is, this is the first of a three-part assignment in which you'll propose to redesign a website. That's part one. Part two is test that website's usability. And part three is to create a formal lab report in which you describe your suggestions for website changes. So those are your three steps in this full assignment, and I've broken them down to make them a little bit more manageable, especially for the summer course when we're kind of packing a lot in. So in this first stage, you're going to create a proposal document for your client, and this document must do the following. So first, number one, you need to have a website. You will choose a small-scale website, preferably from a local business or academic department, so something local, maybe even something that's associated to your field, that you think has several design flaws which you can improve on. So keep this in mind. If you choose a very flawed site, it's going to be much easier to kind of pull out those flaws, describe them, and write the report in which you're proposing doing a usability test. If the flaws are very easy to find, they'll be easy to write about. So another part that you must have are users and personas. So we've done this now. We're really good at user personas. We're going to be doing just another one of those. That's going to be part of 4.1, the first section of this assignment. So just like you've done with the others, you just need to create that kind of imagined user, identifying the primary goals of what they would want to accomplish on the website, what the target audience is, and three main purposes that they would be using the website. So within your user persona, you really want to gear this towards the reason that that user is using, like what are they looking for when they go to this specific website. So just as you're kind of structuring that user persona the way that you have done in the past with your other user personas, make it geared towards the reason they're visiting that website when you're adding kind of their bio and the descriptions and motivations and things like that. Okay, in this first part, you're going to need to describe the flaws. This will be the most important. So identify the design flaws of the website. You're going to analyze two specific pages, so the home page and then a secondary page. You can pick the secondary page, whichever page you want. Just I want to see something on the home page and on the secondary. Sorry. And you'll need to do this visually using screen captures and labels. Now I want to note that I noticed in our last assignment that I had a lot of images, but not many people labeled them. Remember, we talked about in the last unit in my lecture that every time you have an image, it needs to have a caption underneath it, and it needs to be named, figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, and describe what it is. You'll want to be sure that you're labeling the images in this, so your imagined client will be able to see what you're talking about as you're describing the design flaws. Furthermore, you need to describe these flaws in terms of your target users and their goals for the website. So this is where your user persona is going to be very important. So as you're pointing out those flaws, they'll be described in the ways that these are creating kind of obstacles for that user that's using the website most of the time. Okay, and then finally, there's the proposal. So you'll conclude by proposing a usability test to your client, which is the website owner. Which two tasks or flaws will you specifically run the usability test for and why? So tell them, you know, what flaws you're going to be running and why you believe that test needs to be run. It's going, you know, why do it? In this section, basically, you're going to be persuading the client that a usability test will be beneficial. You need to describe a little bit about the general information and type of usability test you perform, and you'll be able to get this kind of terminology from our Krug readings that we'll be doing. Okay, so that is all of the first assignment, 4.1, which will be due at the end of this week. It sounds like it has quite a few steps, but they're really not too, you know, they're pretty basic. Though I think that you'll find them easy to do. You're basically just creating an imagined user, you're finding a flawed website, you're explaining the flaws in terms of how the users are, and then you're telling a client, hey, you should be running this usability test for this reason. So this is all that you're doing, is you're showing how this website is flawed and explaining why a usability test will help. So let's go into, before I go into the next, the troubleshooting for assignment 4. So first, be sure that you read over the assignment sheet. I actually updated the assignment sheet today, Monday, July 10th at about 1 o'clock p.m. because I realized that I had an outdated one that didn't have the third part. Please be sure to upload the most recent assignment sheet that's posted on Canvas. Some common errors are the introduction, that the problem isn't clearly defined and illustrated through examples, quotes, stats, facts in the intro. So be sure that you're clearly defining the problem with the website, that the audience or client isn't clearly defined. Remember, you're pretending to write to someone. You're imagining that you're writing to the person who has created the website, or, you know, the company owner of the website. So be sure that you keep that user in mind, that you are actually proposing this to an imagined, you know, person. The user isn't kept in mind during all the analysis. So remember, as you're discussing the flaws and why they need to be corrected, you are always going to be talking about it in terms of the user and how it is interfering with the user's ability to navigate the website. The examples are too similar to one another. Then the examples aren't described in detail. Examples aren't analyzed enough in terms of why they are designed in the way they were. So remember, you're analyzing rhetoric, user adaptation, and the pros and cons. And then there's not enough time spent on the proposal. So you should propose something that is clear and checks in terms of feasibility that you can talk about. Okay, and so basically this is all about, you need to be just descriptive. You need to explain the flaws. They need to be user-centered. You need to be sure that you're being specific about them. You know, don't just say, don't be vague as you're giving details. And I'll offer some examples of these assignments as we go to kind of help out. So let's go on to a question that we have to answer before we really get into it, is what is a usability test? So like I said before, you're going to be finding a flawed website that you're going to run a usability test on to find how successfully or poorly it's designed for its intended users and purposes. Then you're going to run a test with one user and create a lab report proposing suggestions for improvement. So if you think about this, if you were doing this in a real life situation, if you're, you know, at your job and this is an assignment that you have, these are just the steps that you would go through to fix a website in web design, or any product, but we're focusing on websites. So again, you're going to have the website redesign evaluation, the usability protocol memo, and a final lab report. Those are the 3 steps to get us to kind of complete this entire process of running a usability test. You all are reading Steve Krug's Rocket Surgery Made Easy. I have a quote here: watching people try to use what you're creating, designing, building, or something you've already created, designed, built, with the intention of making it easier for people to use or proving that it is easy to use. This is basically what a usability test is. You're watching, you're seeing how people can use it, you're finding ways that they can use it and looking for ways that they're having trouble so you can fix those. This is key to user-centered design. So what we're doing is writing for client testing on one website in 2 pages of the site. This says 3, please ignore that. You're going to just be doing 2 pages. Since we have less time, I kind of knocked that down. You're going to just be testing 1 participant. It'll take about 45 minutes for you to run this usability test, so keep that in mind. You can use anyone you want. Just be sure that they're not super familiar with the website. Just like when you're doing your instruction set, you'll get better feedback from people that aren't familiar with whatever you're doing. And you're going to design a scripted think aloud protocol, including a homepage tour and a scenario for participants to go through. So you'll have to create your own scenario, which basically, to run the usability test, you have to give the user something to do to see how well they can do it. That's your scenario. So in web design, we're going to be using the Don't Make Me Think model, which means that web design should be obvious and self-explanatory. It shouldn't create frustration or confusion. It should let a user accomplish tasks as easily as possible. Often people like to say that when someone can't navigate technology or a website, that it's the person's fault. In user-centered design, as I've said before, we assume that it's the designer's fault, not the user's. If someone's having trouble navigating the website's flawed. So web design homepage, this is going to be the first part that you're going to be looking at as you do an analysis on your flawed website. So you need to, what is the website? What's the company? How can I get from the place I need to be? Basically, the home page needs to spell out the big picture of the site. This is what you're looking for as you're doing an analysis on the pros and cons. So it needs to have clear navigation, clear imagery and logo, easy to find, easy to understand search bar, it avoids needless words, and it resonates with target audience. So as you're writing your kind of analysis on your primary page, the home page, and the secondary page, these are the things that you look for in the home page. So you're also going to be looking at site structure. So there should generally only have 3 levels of a site structure: the home page, level 1, level 2, level 3. Getting to these lower level pages should be easy and obvious. So as you go to your secondary page, if it's not easy and obvious to get there, there's already a problem that you can call out in your in this 4.1, this first part of the assignment. There should be an understanding of what content belongs in what section and how to get a user to that content in the most difficult parts of the website. So content should be easy to find, it should be intuitive, it should be in places, you know, that a user would expect to go. People shouldn't have to be digging around. If you have to dig around to find a certain piece of information, the website, the structure is flawed. So that's something else to think about, to look for, and to consider writing about as you're writing these first proposals. There's also page structure. You want to see a clear visual hierarchy. You want to see size, spacing, and font that makes sense, that's friendly to the eyes, that creates that scannability. You want nestings. Things should be in the appropriate places. Chunk pages into clear sections, so we need to have things sectioned off. Again, this is part of scannability. Avoid having too much on any page. Getting giant blocks of text is going to turn someone off immediately. That's not scannable at all, and no one's going to take the time to read it. It doesn't let people know what the most important information on the page is. And beware of content below the fold. So if there's important content below the cutoff mark in the on the website, that's a no-no, and that's something else to look for. So you'll see here a web design page structure. So you see the link to the home page up here, the header, local navigation, search banners, ads, contact information, the footer down here. common location for banners and ads over here, the primary location for search and shopping. This is where the eye goes to. This is a common place, navigation and search, identity and titles, navigation links. So you kind of see common and easy to read, easy to follow page structure. So something that's critical to usability as we're thinking about web pages is navigation. So the user needs to be able to go where they want to go. Terms should be obvious. So again, there shouldn't be any digging for information. It should be clear what kind of information is going to be under what place. There needs to be a search bar so someone can do a quick search if they know what they're looking for. Navigation should stay the same across all pages, so it shouldn't change constantly. Someone shouldn't have to figure out with every page as they go deeper into the website how they're supposed to navigate. Navigation should tell us where we are, so you should always be able to tell where you are on a page. And usability is renaming navigation, so it's reiterated. These are all things to think about as you're looking at your web design and thinking about flaws or what kind of scenarios to create or what kind of proposal you might write for improving a website. So there's also signposting. So once a user is on a page, they should be able to see a title on the specific page. There should be a visual marker of the page that a user's on, a button that is lit up to let them know this is where I am, and the path that they took to get to that page. So you should always be able to follow your way backwards also if you need to get back to another place. So signposting is important. And there's uniformity. When you click on something, the title of the button should match the title page that they're sent to. So it needs to be intuitive, it needs to be clear, it needs to follow a certain pattern that makes sense to users. So then there's web design beautification. So there's the uniformity that we talked about. Think about white space. So give your information and images breathing room. You don't want a website to be super cluttered. That's the opposite of white space. The more white space on a page, generally the more ethos the site has. White space doesn't have to be white. It just means that it's not just like cluttered information that almost seems to be slamming into one another. There needs to be a good color scheme. So repeated meaningful colors. The goal is for a 3-color 60-30-10 rule. So 60% 1, 30, and then 10. So you don't want colors all over the place, and you also don't just want one color to make it super bland. Then a visual hierarchy, which we've talked about with everything we've done, and we want this to be consistent. Needs to be image driven, so we don't just want tons of blocks of text everywhere. There needs to be images as well. And then scannability, of course. So use headings, small paragraphs, pull quotes, bullets. When we think about everything that we do needs to be scannable. Websites included, especially websites, because there can be so much information. Users need to be able to move through it quickly and find what they need to find. So now let's go on to 4.2. Now that we've talked about web design and what we'll be looking for as we kind of analyze the pros and cons. For this second part of the project, you're going to write a progress memo in which you describe the specifics of the usability test you're going to run for your client. Though generally you can and should follow Krug's script and advice in the book, for each section I expect you to change or add at least one thing. The goal of each section of this memo is to explain both what you are doing and why. As always for assignment 4, assume that you're writing for a client that doesn't know much about usability. So you're going to be able to rely on Krug a lot. Again, we'll look at some examples to help you kind of imagine what this looks like. This isn't going to be too tough because the script is going to come largely from Krug, from the book. You're just going to make little tweaks that align more, specifically with your user and the website that you've chosen. But this is going to be a pretty simple part. It's just about showing the client kind of the process of the usability test and explaining them, what the usability test is and what you'll be doing. So go ahead and download this PowerPoint so you can check out the link that I have provided here so you can see memo format. What this format will be, though, is the introduction, of course. So what is the purpose of the memo? What does it include? What is the basic test you'll run? Explain to the client what a think aloud protocol is. What types of data do you hope to collect? What are the roles each group member will serve? Well, in this, you can do away with that. You guys aren't doing group members. Nix that. You usually will be explaining that. In this situation, you won't, because it's just you. What types of encouragement will you provide and avoid? This is to your user, to the person that you're going to be running the test on. What type of technology will you use and why? So just kind of explain the process that you're going through. Now, when this is a face-to-face class, there's camera and voice recorders with screen capture programs. We're not going to do that because we don't really have time to get into that. So you're just going to be doing kind of a description of the usability test. Hopefully that will make it easier and kind of more manageable. So, 4.2, the next one is a scripted introduction. So what are you going to say when the test starts? This is all about, this is you talking to the person that you're running the usability test on. So what are the demographic questions you're going to ask? What questions will you ask to gather data about the basic layout of the site? So this actually needs to be a written script that you'll read to the person that you do the usability test on. So again, this isn't super tough. You just need to think about the questions that you're going to be asking. Like what kind of information do you need from the user, and then what kind of information do you need to provide the user? You're just providing that to me in a little mini memo. You're going to have homepage tour questions that you're going to ask. So what are the basic questions you'll ask to get your participant to start talking about the page? Now we're going to be using Think Aloud protocol. So you're kind of prompting them to tell you like what they're seeing, where they're going, and they're using that scenario to get through. But you need to have these scripted basic questions that you'll ask to get them talking about the page, because you might have quiet people. And in real life, when you're doing these usability tests, you need to think of ways you can get people talking. And then there's design scenarios. So give me one scenario as well as the description of the tertiary task that the scenario test. I just need one scenario. So that's basically just a task. You're asking them to do a specific thing in the website that will help you see how the home page and that secondary page works, and the kind of improvements that need to be made, and to describe how the scenario has been designed in the way you have. So after you tell me, I'm going to give them, X scenario, you're going to explain why you've designed that. So tell me the reason for the scenario. Again, this is just really like straightforward if you think about it. And then finally, there's the third part, which is the usability lab report. So this is kind of where everything comes together. In this final part, you're going to write a formal report based on the findings of your usability test for your client. Keep in mind, I keep saying but you're writing to your client, right? So imagine that I'm the person that owns the website and that you're trying to say, hey, we need to make these changes. So keep in mind that this lab report is formal. It needs to follow dual streams of scannable reports. You need to use headings, subheadings, images, lists, etc. that make the information scannable, because if you're presenting this to a client, they need to be able to find information fast and be able to scan it to see, take in a lot at one time. Also remember that you're continuing to write to your client as an audience, continuing to explain the why behind your processes and discussions. So you're imagining that this client has no idea what a usability test or what this is about. So you're not just saying we need to make these changes. You're kind of explaining to them the process that you went through to find, why such and such isn't working. And continue to show directly how the results of your test will benefit your client. And so you'll notice on the assignment sheet that there are 5 parts to this. You're going to have an introduction, procedure, results, discussion, and conclusion. Those are in more detail on the sheet. I'm taking up a lot of time here. I know it's hard to sit and listen to these for a long time. But basically, you're just going to have the introduction, which explains the general process you use. What is usability testing? Why are you doing it? Who is the key audience you are testing? Who are your subjects? What are the predictions you made in the very first part about poor design? So you're basically giving a summary of the 4.1 that we did. So you're just kind of taking that information and making it into an introduction for this. You're going to talk about procedure next, which explains the procedure. So you're going to just take information right from the second one, and talk about how that played out. You're going to talk about, just the scenarios, not on the analysis, but on actually what happened during the usability test you conducted. So you want to give the details of how you ran the experiment, what was your protocol, what was your scenario, how long did each experiment take. Now remember, this is in past tense because you're just telling the client, I asked the user to do X, it took user X long to find this, the user had trouble at this point, the user said blah, blah, blah. You're going to actually be using quotes from the usability test as well, things that the user actually said, so you need to be taking notes as you do that. You're going to talk about the results, so choose several key block quotes from your test and give an image from the website that illustrate what each quote is specifically talking about. So just be sure there's some kind of organization scheme to this. What did each subject state about a specific part of the site? Describe one major problem that needs fixed and one minor. So on this part, is going to be where you use those block quotes and you use screenshots to illustrate the problems that the user had. So like point out to, you'll take screenshots and show this is the area that the user got caught up on. This is what they had to say about that. So you're using longer block quotes in which you really use that think aloud protocol and use the feedback from the user to both show and explain where the problems are. And you're going to explain one major problem and one minor one that you think needs to be fixed. So then you're going to have discussions. So what do your results mean? What were the most common errors you saw? How do these errors differ from or corroborate the predictions in your introduction? Which problem will you tackle first? How will your solutions benefit the company? Remember, you're always talking in terms of benefiting the company, directly impact the user experience and profitability. What are some possible solutions? So you'll follow Krug's tweaks methods from chapter 11 in this one. And for each of your 3 major problems, I want you to provide a quick fix, so a tweak that could be implemented immediately. Remember Krug's advice on reductive versus additive changes. If you haven't read Krug yet, that will make more sense after you have. And then a long-term fix that will take some time, but will be worth it and will perfect the website. So these are all the 3 steps. We're going to do this in stages. That's why I gave this one 3 weeks to do. It's a little bit longer, but if we tackle it in this 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, I think we should have an easy time of it. What's important to remember in this is that you will be running a test. So you'll need a test subject and you'll need the time to do it. And if you have any questions at all, again, you can post them to the Unit 4 questions, email me, or shoot me an email that says you want to do a phone call, and we can do that as well. And I hope you have fun.